Hi, I just love that tag that says it's Church at 434 in Motion, don't you? I mean, you got to hear that and see that, and the music's is there. So now you're expecting to get the latest release of what is going to be the next show for the Church at 434 in Motion. You're getting ready to enter a special series. This is an intro that we're creating just for the church release. We're getting ready to talk about the fear virus. And so there's a series of episodes that are coming up where we're going to talk about fear. These were created as a resource for Face the Fear, but we wanted to release them for you as well because you sometimes have to deal with fear, and there are other people out there that you know that have to deal with fear. And so we're getting ready to enter to what is a series of back-to-back releases that will come out on our regular release days that talk all about fear. And so we wanted you to know that. And so each day on the church release, on the Church 434 in Motion, you're going to hear this all over again. It's not a rerun. It's just me giving you the tag to let you know that as soon as I'm quiet, there's going to be a brand new screen that comes up to give you the title of the new episode, and we want you to enjoy it, and hopefully it's a great resource that will help you deal with the virus of fear in your own life, as well as helping others in their life. Okay, that's it. I'm done talking. Let's get on with the new episode. Hi, welcome to another episode of the Fear Virus, as we're looking at some things that help you learn to deal with fear in the right way, or a healthy terror, as we're kind of diving down into it. In this episode, I want to talk to you about learning to hear things differently. To begin a story, the aspiring psychiatrists were attending their first class on emotional extremes. Now, just to establish some parameters, the professor said to the student from Arkansas, "What is the opposite of joy?" The student thought for a moment and said, sadness. Good, said the professor. And then looked at the young lady from Oklahoma. And the professor said, "What is the opposite of depression?" And the lady from Oklahoma thought for a minute and said, "Well, I suppose it would be elation." The professor said, "Yeah, that's a pretty good answer." Okay. And then he turned to the man from Texas and he said, "You, sir, tell me, what is the opposite of woe?" And the Texan thought for a minute and said, "Well, I believe, sir, that would be giddy up." Huh. He just heard something different. See, while they were all talking about psychological terms, I'm explaining this obviously to you. In Texas, when you hear woe, you think of a horse. And so that's what he heard. We always hear things through whatever filters we have placed above on either side of our heads that somehow will filter out and make sure that we only hear the things that we do. It works all the time. Parents have the unique ability to hear their kids or distinguish their kids' screams at times in the midst of a bunch of other kids. They learn to recognize the sound of their child's voice that rides over a cacophony of other voices. We fine-tune our hearing to hear many things. But for the disciples that are on the mountainside with Jesus, Peter clears his throat to speak. And in verse 4 he says, "Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, I'm going to put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Peter is convinced that this is something to remember. And so if he does a construction project, a building project, it's going to be good. And so he wants to head up the committee. He wants to be the first guy there. He wants to be the guy in charge. And while he was still speaking, in verse 5 it says, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son whom I love. With him I'm well pleased. Listen to him." In that passage, the word beloved means priceless and unique, which basically means there is none like Christ. Now, this is where we start getting into the faith element, and this becomes really, really important. If you're from a faith background, this will make sense. If you're not from a faith background, this is where you might get into the murky water or the high weeds, and don't. Just stay with me and just listen. But that means that there's no one else like Jesus. Not Moses, not Elijah, not Peter, not Buddha, not Muhammad, not Confucius. There's no one like Jesus. Beloved means priceless, unique. Jesus, according to the Father, is his priceless, unique Son. And notice that Peter kind of missed this, because he is trying to put Jesus in the great men of history box. what I mean by that is simply this. If Peter would have listened to what was being said, he'd have heard the admonition and listened to him. But Peter also would have had that realization that there was only one man on the mountain that day that he needed to focus on and he needed to worship. Not Moses, not Elijah, but Jesus. And then when we get to the passage in verse 6, it says this. When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, and they were terrified. A holy, healthy fear. It is that fear of knowing that the Creator who hung the stars in the skies was right there in their midst. See, when we see God as He really is and we get it, there is a conversion of our fear. Fear of the Lord is the deeply sane recognition that we're not God and there's a real God in control. And when Jesus is great, our fears are not. I'll say that again. When Jesus is great, our fears are not. And when Jesus is great, we hear things differently. And what gets squashed is the voice of those things that would make us so fearful. A puny box-sized Jesus has no power over sickness, corruption, identity theft, stock market crashes, checkbook balances, wacky landlords, pompous employers, or pandemics. A packageable and portable Jesus is great for the purse on the shelf, but it does nothing for our fears. And Jesus comes into the mix and He blows away our preconceptions. Psalm 27:1, another passage in the Bible says, the Lord is light, is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? We've got to learn to listen for His voice and His leading. And when we do that, then all of a sudden, those things that we hear that make us so frightened begin to be pushed aside. And the thing that we hear most clearly is the one whom God said, listen to Him. That's Jesus. Now, that got real spiritual there for a minute, and I got that. I completely understand that. But you stay with it, because we're talking about how to have that holy, healthy terror and cure that fear virus. And so we'll pick up again next time.